Seventh grade lesson 2.10, and this is the last lesson, is over multiplying and dividing decimals. And I decided to put them all into one video. It's going to be a little bit longer probably because we're going to have some examples that we need to go through, but it shouldn't be too bad. And this should be review for you. Now our goal by the end of this video and the end of this lesson, you are going to be able to multiply and divide numbers containing decimals. So in order to multiply decimals, what you do is you first set up the problem and multiply your numbers like normal. So just ignore the decimal points, act like they're not there, and multiply your numbers. And then you're going to count the number of digits behind the decimal in the factors. And you're looking for the total number. So you're going to have to look at both numbers that you are multiplying. Those are your factors, the two numbers that you're multiplying. And find how many digits, how many numbers come after a decimal point total. Then you're going to take the decimal in your product, which is the answer, and you're going to move the decimal point that number of spaces to the left. So whatever answer you got when you counted the numbers after the decimal point in the problem, you're going to move it to the left that number of spaces in your answer.
Okay, so let's go old school. Let's go back and review how to do old school long division and old school multiplication by hand. So we're going to take the example 1 7/10 times 25 hundredths. Now I suppose we could change this so that they are fractions and multiply them because you know multiplying by fractions is easy, but I think you also need to know how to multiply decimals. So I'm just going to set this up like it is a normal problem. So 1 7/10 times 25 hundredths. I don't really need to add the 0, it's just a placeholder. Now I multiply. 5 times 7 is 35. Carry the 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 more is 8. I do a placeholding 0 because now I'm multiplying tens. 2 times 7 is 14. Carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3. And then I add together my pieces. 5 plus 0 is 5. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. So I got the answer 425. Now I go back and I count the number of digits that were behind the decimal in my two factors. So I come back up here. I've got one number after the decimal here, and I have 1, 2. So that's a total of 3. That means in my answer, I'm going to take the decimal point, which is here behind the 5, and move it to the left 3 places. 1, 2, 3. My answer is 0 and 425 thousandths. Let's do one more like this. So I have the problem 10 times 0 and 375 thousandths. Now again, I could change these into fractions, but let's go ahead and multiply. And because I know due to the commutative property of multiplication, it doesn't matter what order I write this in. So I'm going to write the 375 thousandths on the top times 10. This is going to make it easier for me in a couple different ways. Number one, there's only 2 digits that have to be multiplied again. One of them is 0. I know 0 times anything is 0. So I'm just going to start off 0 for multiplying everything in the ones. Let's go to my tens. Placeholding 0. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 3 is 3. Let's add everything together. 0, 5, 7, 3. So 10 times 375 thousandths. I got 3,750, but now I have to go back and count my decimal places. There's 1, 2, 3 numbers behind the decimal here, 0 here, that's a total of 3. By the way, you don't have to write this stuff. I'm just writing it out for you so you can see it. So decimal point, move it 1, 2, 3 spaces. I get 3 and 75 hundredths. And that's my answer.
Now, if you want to divide decimals, you're going to set up your problem like normal. So you're going to make, I don't know what's called the house. I call it the division bracket. So you're going to put your top number inside, the bottom number goes on the outside. So numerator goes inside, the denominator goes outside. Or your first number goes inside the bracket, the second number goes outside. Then you're going to take the decimal point in the divisor, and that's the number on the outside. That's what you're dividing by, divisor. You're dividing by the divisor, and you're going to move it to the far right of that number. So count however many spaces it takes to move the decimal point in the divisor, that number you're dividing by, to the end, the far right of the number. That is a number you need to remember, because then you're going to take the decimal in your dividend, your inside number, the one that's being divided, dividend, and you're going to move the decimal point the same number of spaces to the right as you moved in part 2. So in both cases, these decimals are being moved to the right. After you've done that, you're going to divide like normal. Just ignore the decimal point. After it's been placed, you're done with it. The decimal is going to go straight up from the dividend to the quotient or into your answer. And be extra careful that you're keeping your place values correctly. I actually do not place my decimal point until I come to it and my dividend. So I'm just going through and solving. Whenever I see there's the decimal point, I automatically put it up in my quotient, in my answer, and then I continue on like that decimal point doesn't exist. Other people do it different ways. This is just the way that I found best for keeping my place values all nice and neat and orderly.
Hey, division. Let's go old school. Let's do long division. Woohoo! Long division. So I'm going to take 1 and 84 100ths divided by 2. 1.84, the 1 and 84 hundredths, that's my dividend. It goes inside the brackets. 2 goes on the outside. I would move, if there were a decimal here, I would move the decimal points in both problems. Since there's not, I'm just going to divide like normal and act like the decimal point doesn't exist. 2 goes into 1, 0 times. There's my decimal point. Carry it up. 2 goes into 18. Again, once I've carried up my decimal point, it's gone. 2 goes into 18 9 times. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 minus 18 is 0. Carry down my 4. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Remainder of 0. I've got my answer. 1 and 84 100ths divided by 2 is 0.92 or 92 100ths. Let's do 2 more. 6 and 2 tenths divided by 1 tenth. The 6 and 2 tenths is my dividend. It goes inside the bracket. The 1 tenth is my divisor. It goes on the outside. Now, I've got a decimal point here. I do not want to figure out how many times 1 tenth goes into everything. But I know that I can just move this decimal point one place to the right, and as long as I do the same thing inside my brackets, it's not going to affect the result. 6 and 2 tenths divided by 1 tenth is going to be the same as if I take 62 divided by 1. So 1 goes into 6 times. 1 times 6 is 6. That's 0. Bring down my 2. 1 goes into 2 twice. 2 times 1 is 2. Bring down my 0. I'm at my decimal point. I have a remainder of 0. I can stop. So the answer here is 62. 1 tenth goes into 6 and 2 tenths 62 times. Let's do one more problem so you can practice moving that decimal point. So 4 and 8 tenths divided by 6 100ths. The 4 and 8 tenths is the divisor, or is the dividend. It goes inside the brackets. The 6 hundredths is the divisor. It goes outside. Please do not get in the habit, though, of the larger number going inside the bracket and the smaller outside. It does not always happen that way. If you looked at the first example, that's not what happened. The first number goes inside. So I don't want to figure out how many times 6 100ths goes into something. I want to figure out how many times 6 goes into something. That's a whole lot easier. So I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places. If I move the decimal point on the outside 2 places, I have to move it inside. 1, 2. Well, there's no number here, so I'm going to put a place holding 0. 6 goes into 4, 0 times. 6 goes into 48, 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. I get a remainder of 0, but I still have this place holding 0. I've got to keep going until I get to that decimal point or until I run out of numbers. So 0 comes down, 6 goes into 0, 0 times. 0 times 6 is 0. And now I'm at the decimal point. I have a remainder of 0. I can stop. 4 8/10 divided by 6 100ths is equal to 80. If you have any questions, come tomorrow with them and we will go over this.